everyone. Thank you for your attention and your curiosity this entire conference, and hopefully for our talk as well. And thank you to Team Estonia for your stories about beginnings. Today we're going to tell some stories about endings. And thank you for that wonderful introduction as well. Our story starts at, hello, we're going to talk about endings. Our story begins at the Department of Veteran Affairs, which we'll be calling VA for short. And we're going to talk about our experiences leaving that project, because every project that we begin, no matter how much we love it, we're eventually going to have to leave.
It's true.
It's inevitable. And we're going to talk about practices that we did to ensure that our work would be maintained and carried on by the people staying behind us. Quick poll, raise your hand if you have exited a project in a way that you're proud of. And raise your hand or keep your hand up if you've exited a project in a way that, looking back, you think you could have improved. Thank you. I think there are a lot of stories in the room, and hopefully at the end of the talk or during the panel, we can talk about your stories as well. So our story, it happens at VA. It begins in 2015. And for some context, VA is an enormous American agency. It has about almost 400,000 employees, which, through some quick research, we realized is nearly the number of people the total number of civil servants working in the United Kingdom. And keep in mind that for every employee at VA, there are about 2 contractors working full-time, also serving veterans. Not only is VA enormous, it's also enormously risk-averse. If you are at all familiar with the story of veterans in the United States in recent history, you know that time and time again, unfortunately, VA has lost their trust in recent history, many different service delays or other more serious problems. As a result, staff there are highly motivated not to rock the boat. They don't want to be the source of another New York Times headline about the VA. And the VA, like all federal agencies in the US, has been burnt by technology projects. So this is a number from 2017. It's the amount of money that the US government spent on federal IT projects. And almost all of them are over budget or behind schedule or both. And almost half never get shipped, ever. So there's little trust between VA and external teams that it might bring on to fix some of the problems that have arisen. And so when our team entered the picture in about 2015, things were probably as bad as they could get. So I'll tell 2 stories to explain that. The first is a story that is representative of a lot of veteran experiences in the US. It's a story of a veteran we'll call Reggie. Reggie served in the Army, and while he was there, he hurt his back. When he came back, he filed a claim to get benefits for that back injury, but he was denied from the VA. So he filed something called an appeal to contest that decision and get the benefits that he wanted. What he didn't expect was to wait over 5 years for his appeal to get resolved. And in that time, he didn't have benefits, and his injury just got worse and worse and worse. And Reggie isn't alone. When we started the project, about 400,000 veterans were waiting in line to hear back about their appeal. And on average, they were each waiting about 5 years. And now, what you're looking at behind me is a screenshot of the core piece of technology that VA staff use in the appeals process. It is quite old. It's called VACLS, it stands for this, but the more important fact is that it was built in 1979, and it's still in use today. And it was built by one person. Jed is actual name, but we quickly realized that Jed is also just an excellent dude, and it's an excellent acronym for his service at VA. So for the last 3 decades, Jed has been the only builder, maintainer, steward of this extremely core piece of technology. I see a lot of shock. This is a fairly common story in US government of one single lone individual making something from scratch to fill a need and that becoming the system and gaining a lot of trust for their commitment and resourcefulness from the agency that they're working at. But this isn't really a sustainable way to make technology. I don't think Jed planned on spending his entire career at VA maintaining the system that now holds millions of appeals over the last 3 decades. Jed can't take vacation, and in 2016 he was approaching retirement age, and the VA couldn't wait anymore. They needed to figure out an exit plan for Jed. So that's where we came in. So I told you at the beginning of the talk that this is a story about how Kavi and I left the project. It's also a story about how our team came in and helped Jed one day exit the project. And the strategies that we'll share about exiting are at their core strategies about building trust between ourselves and the people who remain to carry on our work and really Jed's work. So if you leave this talk with one thing in your brain, it's this, which is that building trust is a core piece to making sure that our work carries on without us. And if you have some other space in your brain, we have a lot of practices to talk you through, so hopefully you'll remember those too. And Kavi will tell you about them.
Hello. So how was it that this team of 5 new techies from the United States Digital Service, who were fairly new to government and didn't have that much experience working with it, would gain the same trust that Jed had earned over more than 30 years of service? It was going to take a lot of work, but here are some of the things that we learned that helped. But first, a little context. Software development at the VA is a very waterfall process. It's a lot of heavy and inefficient steps in order to make any software releases, and those releases happen maybe 4 times a year, and with one major release a year. So it isn't a lot of rapid and fast innovation as much as very cautious and slow development. Also, there isn't a lot of room for changes or responsiveness to the people who are working on the ground. Most development teams and contractors are limited in their capacity or ability to communicate with people who are doing the work on a day-to-day basis or working with people who are managing policy or regulation or helping people out. Our approach was very, very different. From the beginning, we wanted to instill a sense of focus on constant delivery and iteration, something we learned from GDS here. And when we first approached the Board of Veterans Appeals, instead of promising this very big, sweeping software that would fix all of their problems, we offered something a little bit more mundane. We said we'd like to spend about 3 months working on a discovery sprint with you and see what we can do in that time. Let us prove it to you that we are able to do development in the way that we're claiming to. And in that time, we gained a couple of pretty significant wins. We got some stuff done. The first was we mapped out the entire appeals process end to end by interviewing employees and others at the Board of Veterans Appeals, this agency that's responsible for managing the appeals. We developed a simple 3-page web application to reduce the clerical errors from intake of appeals at the board. And importantly, we also ran this script that found more than 2,000 appeals that had gone missing from the board during that process. So these initial successes kind of amplified the trust that we had in the board, and the board had the trust that they had in us, and helped us proceed with the project. This is our mission statement, and it brings to mind this very good principle that we have, I think, on our project, which is not focusing just on technology, but on whatever's beyond technology. We worked very closely with not just the tech team and IT team within the VA, but we also spoke with legislators, we spoke with the Secretary of the VA, congressional offices, the Inspector General's office, and in doing so, we were able to accomplish a lot more than just build simple software. We were able to improve the way that the VA was communicating with veterans. We were able to create new legislation that would ideally improve the appeals process for everybody. And we were able to improve the day-to-day policies and workflows that individual employees had to go through on an ongoing basis. It also wasn't always easy to work with the teams that we were interacting with, as I'm sure a lot of you can attest to. Some teams just didn't operate in the same way that we did. As I mentioned, that waterfall approach was really present everywhere that we went. And one team in particular was really, really hard to work with. I won't name them here, but their approach was very much come up with a set of requirements a half a year in advance, and then lock those into place, and then there's no room for adjustment. And we, on the other hand, needed to integrate with this team, and we're asking for changes on a daily basis, asking, hey, can you just create this new API for us? Can you help change the design of this product for us? And they just kept saying, no, 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 no. And that was really frustrating for us until we realized, we should probably take a step back and just listen to what they're doing. What we found out is the way that they organize their project is by percentage points. They say, give every major release about 20% of effort for a particular release, and minor issues about 1 or 2%. And that's how they map out what they're going to work on. So we realized that the way that we were doing things, we were never going to make them move at our pace. So we tried to fit ourselves into their process. And the way that we did that is negotiated an ongoing 5% of effort for every release that they had going forward. We actually did this in writing. We had them sign kind of like a contract to agree with us. And we did that. And that 5% was to respond to any last-minute needs that we had on the project. So any type of integration that we need, or support, or just asking questions. And that allowed us to work together in, if not the perfect way, would at least let us in a more bearable way. So several months after focusing on iteration and meeting with other teams across the organization, we'd finally gained this foothold of trust in the VA. And now, a team of 1 had become a team of 5. And we had a good idea of what we needed to build in order to replace this existing appeal system. The problem was we needed to execute on it. And we weren't going to be able to do that with just 5 people from the United States Digital Service. As Xena mentioned earlier, the trust in contractors at the VA was very, very low. And it's easy to see why, with all that waste, that relationship has been strained. But we knew that we had to do something. We had to find a way to build trust in the contractors we were bringing on, and we also had to find a way to identify them. So we set out to identify trustworthy contractors, and to set the context for this, I'll tell you the way that a contract is normally set up in the government, at least at the VA. A proposal is put online, and any contractor who's interested in submitting can submit a often long proposal for what they plan on doing. And in these proposals, they're often quite ridiculous. They offer the sun and the moon. They offer, the best security experts and the best cybersecurity and the best proprietary project management plans to accomplish everything that you could ever want under budget and on time as quickly as you wanted to. And these plans don't actually pan out. Obviously, no contractor can do all of those things, even the best ones. And so what ends up happening is the VA ends up getting disappointed. And while most contractors are surely very highly trustworthy and very experienced in developing successful projects, we just wanted to be extra sure. So what we ended up doing was creating a 72-hour coding challenge where the participants created a prototype app of an alien banking application. And this allowed us to evaluate each team on their abilities from an information security standpoint, their design skills, and their development skills. With this criteria in mind, we knew that the people that we were getting in were capable of doing the work that we'd hoped they could do. This is actually a time lapse of the team that won, Shelley's team, Nava, and others, participating in the coding challenge over the 72 hours. As you can see, some people are staying later than others. So with that, we now have a team of 5 contractors that joined us to form the Caseflow team. Hooray! So we have these contractors, and we have a team of more than 30 people, I believe it's 36 people, who are now working together. But how can we make sure that they work well together? Well, the first step in building the trust there was intermingling the teams, mixing them up. So these are actually the sprint teams that we have on the project. The team names are represented by the emoji. There's Whiskey, Tango, Foxtrot, and Sierra. And each column represents a different sprint team. Each of these colored logos shows a different product that they were working on. So you can see that each team is working on multiple products. And you can also see that the team's makeup is mixed between contractors and people who are working for USDS. This is really important, and we found that this helped build trust, because if there was a problem, it wasn't going to be a contractor problem or a government problem, it was going to be everyone's problem. And in a similar way, if there was a success, everyone can share in it. This really helped us avoid that common thing that happens in many contracting teams in the government, which is this us versus them attitude, and allowed everyone to kind of focus on the more important problems. The next step was making sure that all of these new team members were working well together and talking to one another. So we ended up creating a lot of new ways of communicating. We had more frequent one-on-ones with each individual team member. We had stakeholder meetings more regularly. We had both technical retrospectives on product issues, as well as kind of an emotional retrospective where we shared a lot of feels. We documented a lot in GitHub. We shared all types of technical discussions, and we kind of used GitHub as our single source of truth. And we also did a lot of team bonding. Here's some examples of that. This is that emotional retrospective. We had people fill out a spreadsheet and ask questions like, how satisfying was your week? What's something large or small that you or someone else accomplished this week that you're proud of? What concerns you the most? And these questions are intentionally vague, so people bring up topics that may not be covered in a day-to-day meeting or a one-on-one. This is one of my favorite moments from the team. It's when we all went out to bowling together. You don't really see this in many contracting and government teams in the United States, but we had a really good time, and again, just kind of building that trust amongst one another. And this is an example of how we use GitHub, and this is similar to, I think, some of the approaches that were described earlier on. A technical person is assigned a task to investigate a particular issue. In this case, it's how we should handle unique identifiers. They write up a description of the problem, providing context and giving some potential options. People have a few days to respond to that. They write comments, they give alternate options, they have a very public kind of debate amongst the team. And then a meeting that normally should take or has taken hours to happen usually takes about 30 minutes to happen once everybody's on the same page. Finally, the other thing that we did to create better trust amongst the team was, instead of hiring people from external parties to lead the team, we tried to promote as many people from within. And this was something we failed at really early on, actually. We hired people into leadership positions, but we found that they didn't have the context of the culture of the team, they didn't have the experience working on the projects that we had done, and they weren't familiar with the processes that we were using. And as a result, there was a lot of pushback both from below and also from above, and it just didn't work out. There wasn't a lot of continuity. On the flip side, once we started promoting people from the inside, once we gave anyone who had a really good idea about a particular product direction ownership over that idea, and that person, I should note, could have been a contractor or a government employee. We didn't really care at that point, nor do we today. That person had all the benefits that we were seeking. They knew the project, they knew the problem they were solving, and they were excited about it.
Thanks, Kavi. I have an anecdote to tell about the promoting leadership from within that I actually just thought of. There was some kerfuffle about government funding a couple months ago where the government had to basically be put on pause for a day or a half day. There's some emails going around to our project lead, like, are your contractors going to come in? Who is supervising them? And he wrote back something like, it's fine, they've got it handled. They don't need us to be in to continue doing the work. So the work continued, which is a great segue into the last set of practices that we'll share, which are all about how to maintain continuity when people leave. Our team of 36, we weren't a static team. People came and left. In fact, a couple months after I came onto the project, Kavi left. And a couple months ago, at the start of 2018, I left, and we were replaced by new, extremely accomplished designers. We now have a third generation of designers on the team, one of whom, Sneha, is in the audience, and she is wonderful. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about how we maintain that continuity. The first practice is stop working early. I don't mean just stop doing your job completely. What I mean is, before Kavi left, he announced it well in advance to the rest of the team. His USDS term of 2 years was up, and he needed to move on to something else. So he told us that 3 months before he planned to leave. And it's not like he wasn't doing anything for those 3 months, but he took a step back from his day-to-day design and leadership responsibilities and noticed where the gaps were, where was more information needed, where might staff capacity have to move around. And by the time I left the team, many of these practices had been tried and true, so I took a step back 3 weeks before I departed, just to see if the product team I was on could carry on smoothly without me. And documentation has come up again and again throughout our talk, so I'm going to give you a couple examples of how we documented product decisions so that folks could carry on without us. Again, on GitHub, every project has an overview, project history, and links to all the necessary research summaries and insights. The most important part of this is taking note of major decisions that have been made throughout the project's history, so someone can quickly understand why we are where we're here. These slides that you see are from a virtual whiteboarding tool called Mural. It's what the product team uses to work on more day-to-day granular features. This is a large whiteboard that is accessible to the whole product team, even though only certain people are working on certain aspects. The top part is all of the existing research, assumptions, and open questions going into a particular feature experience. Initial explorations. And I mentioned the whole product team has access to this. It doesn't mean that we're designing things by committee. It simply means that there's a specific time during the project and an area on the whiteboard where people can leave feedback, ask questions, weigh in, even if you're an engineer working on this project. And the designers and product folks responsible take that feedback, make further iterations, record what they learned from usability testing and design decisions. And working in a way like this makes it such that documentation doesn't have to be an extra step on top of the work. It is just the work. And lastly, we created a lot of offboarding checklists and guides for future designers taking off from the project. One last method of information sharing I'll leave with you is called an AMA, or an Ask Me Anything. Before leaving the team, I couldn't possibly think about all of the questions someone might have for me, so I asked the team. People submitted questions they had for me before my departure anonymously using a form, and my colleague and I, who were departing at the same time, used Trello to make a Jeopardy-style quiz session for the entire team, where each question became an emoji card. And we chose questions like, do you have any advice for the engineering team, in a publicly accessible format for the whole team. This was a fun and engaging way to get to know each other and share context and answer questions that I didn't even know people might have had. So, Kavi and I are no longer on the team, but we wanted to give you an update to all those threads that we started at the very beginning. Where's Jed? Where's Reggie? What's going on? So this is something that we have been keeping track of the entire project. It is the backlog of veteran appeals. So from 2008 to 2016, veterans had been appealing things at a steady rate, and they had been accumulating up until a peak of over 400,000 existing appeals. Around the same time that our larger caseload team formed and we were beginning to implement technology and process changes, you see that backlog starting to plateau. That means that veterans aren't going to wait longer than 5 years, as the pattern suggests. And you see in 2018 that that number starts to nosedive. So we're hopeful that this means that future veterans will no longer have to wait on the order of years. And while we can't say that we are 100% responsible for changing the tide, we do feel like these things are highly correlated, that our team and the way we worked had a lot to do with changing the story for veterans. As for Jed, we are very excited to celebrate his retirement whenever he decides he's ready to leave VA. He hasn't decided that yet, but we're pretty confident that he no longer has to do the work of over 30 people, and he has a clear path to leave, and we can carry on the work without him. And this is one of my favorite moments from my time at VA. It was at Kavi's going away party. I think it speaks to the closest of connection between everyone on the team. And since then, the team has created a lot of safe spaces, like a culture workshop that volunteers ran a couple months ago to surface things that weren't working as well on the team. And one thing that came up was there are a lot of avenues to provide feedback on how the team was doing or the project was doing, but no clear way to give each other feedback. On a mixed team, no one officially has a people manager that is actually belonging to the same organization that they do. There's not a clear way to tell someone something about how you might work together better, how they might be doing their job differently. So the team recently instituted formal 360s as a way to gather feedback and understand how to improve the way they work together. So over the last few decades, the people working on appeals technology have gone from 1 person in 1979 to 5 in 2015 to over 30 in 2016. And in 2019, our contract ends. The contractors will probably have to leave, and potentially USDS too. And you might be curious, what's going to happen then? What's the next transition? And to be very honest, we don't know. We really don't. We don't know who's going to inherit it next. What we do know is that right now, literally right now, because it's still working hours on the East Coast, there's some highly capable people still on the team having meetings, prototyping things, trying to figure out who are the right people to take on this work and how do we prepare this work so they can have it. And in closing, at every handoff in our project, from 1 to 5, 5 to 30, 30 to whatever comes next, we've faced unknown challenges, and we worked through them in all the varieties of ways that we shared with you by focusing on how to build trust. And here are all of the practices that we shared with you today. I'm not going to go down the list and enumerate them, but they're here for you to take pictures of. I'll pause for a second. Great. So here are all the ways that we learned how to build trust at VA. And another major takeaway is that building trust for our team didn't mean that there was less trust to go around for everybody else. Trust is not zero-sum. The more you can build it up, the more there is for everyone involved. You might be wondering what Kavi and I are doing now that we're not at the VA. Even if you're not, we're going to tell you anyway, starting with Kavi.
Yeah, so I'm actually currently working at an organization, think tank in the United States, working on reuniting families who've been separated at the border, and been working with a bunch of NGOs and trying to get them to work together and trust one another.
And I'm working on another team at NAVA on improving social services at the state government level, so things like access to health insurance, food assistance, cash assistance. And we are bringing together departments that also historically have not worked together closely. So we are starting to implement these practices we learned at VA in these new contexts. And it's been proving to be very useful so far. So I'm very curious, as we're sharing these methods with you, how they're resonating with you. So we'll close with 2 questions for you to digest. What are you working on now? Who will be carrying on the work without you? And what are you doing to prepare them? Thank you so much.